friends, today I'm gonna do my wrap up for the first half of May. So somehow I managed to already read 10 things in the first half of May. So this is everything that I've read up until the 15th. And I'm super excited to do this wrap up because I had some really, really great reads in there. And also some not so great ones. Rather some controversial opinions as well. So let's get started. So first off, I read Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I had an arc of this and I did a full review for this, which I am encouraging you to check out if you want to hear my full thoughts, because I didn't love this book as much as everybody else, which really doesn't say anything because basically everybody loves it. Like, I've rarely even seen 4-star reviews for this. Most people that I know give it 5 stars. And I think that's totally valid and I'm so happy for these people. Sadly, for me, it just wasn't that way. And in my review, I really go in depth with my issues that I had with this book and why it ended up falling a little bit flat for me. I think that I could have totally loved this and then I would have mentioned all of the negative things and still ended up giving it 5 stars. Similarly as I did with A Prince on Paper, that I also ended up really loving even though I had some issues with it. But yeah, there were just a couple of things, like as a European, I was just kind of like, okay, how much research did this person do? And just things that are like, first of all, I'm not from the UK, and second of all, I am not an expert on the British royal family or how it all works, but there were things that seemed wrong that were easily researchable. And so I was kind of just like, these are just things that as someone who's not from America, I just have a hard time overlooking that. And sometimes I just feel like, like European yells at cloud. At the same time, that's just something that I just can't turn off in my brain. I also just think that when it comes to, a romance between the first son and a British prince, I think that I wanted a little bit more of the consequences. It is definitely something that gets talked about, that it is like an issue for a lot of people in America and for a lot of people in the UK, but that there's also a lot of supporters out there. And I feel like even though this was obviously definitely a topic in the book itself, I wanted a little bit more of the actual consequences of this super public relationship between these super public people. And I think that, especially just looking at the UK and the way the situation was handled there, I just really would have loved to see some more of the consequences. Everything that regarded the UK and the royal family kind of felt like brushed over and kind of scraping the surface, and I just wanted more. I also think that the beginning of this enemies to lovers romance wasn't enough enemies. I wanted a little bit more build up of that and them staying a little bit longer before they get into friends. I had a couple of issues and it just, started piling up, and I'm not quite sure. It's like a 3.5 star read for me, something between that. If I look at some of the other reads that I had that I gave 3 or 3.5 stars, I'm just kind of like, it's probably more of a 3 star. I still really enjoyed it, but I just focused very much on the negative things because y'all already know that most people love it and that it's a great book, so I thought I'd focus on the things that I didn't like. Then I listened to Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid and narrated by a whole ensemble cast. Another book that everybody seems to love. Everybody that's listening to the audiobook at least seems to be loving it, and I didn't. And this Red, White and Royal Blue, I will completely I will support, and I'm happy that people love it. Daisy Jones and the Six is one of those books where I just don't get it. First of all, a book should not just work as an audiobook. You need to be able to physically read it as well. And the fact that a lot of people couldn't get through the physical book and only get through the audiobook, that's honestly already something where I'm like, that's however much you end up liking the audiobook, I'm already like, that's shitty. But then I personally also didn't really like the audiobook. I honestly don't like, except for if it's a memoir read by the author, I don't like if the narrators or the actors in that case get too emotional. The whole emotional scale of this book was completely through the people and their voices. And I didn't like it. I honestly didn't like it. And I know that's something that's very personal, but for me it was like too much to hear everybody's emotions and not get I wanted to like read about the emotions as well. I also think that the characters are very unlikable, and I think that that is exactly what the book is aiming for, and I think that that is a good thing. I think especially Daisy Jones, similar to Evelyn Hugo, I like that they are unlikable characters, and I think that it's good to show that women can be unlikable but still at the same time be like good, well-written characters, you know? And I definitely appreciated that. But at the same time, I just really didn't like the plot. And so I had issues with appreciating the characters. You know, like if you like the plot, if you like where the story is going and the storyline and everything, then you're kind of just like, well, whatever, I don't have to like the characters. But like I was just desperately looking for something to like. I also just immediately, when I realized where this book was going, what was kind of the big thing about it, I just kind of immediately knew I wouldn't like it. I obviously can't go into detail at all, but I'm gonna say that the kind of main theme, no, it's not the main theme, but kind of the main issue where this story is kind of headed is something that I just really didn't like. I don't necessarily think that it's in general a storyline that I don't like, but I just think in this novel, with the way it was done, it did not work for me. And also it's funny to me that this is something that happens in other novels in similar ways, and sometimes even in YA novels, and people want to hate on it all the time. Like there's a couple of books out there that the whole community hates for having the exact same thing in there as this book has in there. If you've read the book, you probably know what I'm talking about if I'm not being too cryptic. I was honestly just mostly annoyed at it. And there's more things that annoyed me while listening to it. But it's one of those books, especially with having read 10 books this month, it's one of those books that I just finished and then I kind of forgot about it because I didn't like it. I was not a fan. And it's kind of like, what did I say? In my Goodreads review, I said, it's a level of thanks, I hate it, that only something like the How I Met Your Mother finale could reach. So that's that. I gave Daisy Jones a 6, 2 out of 5 stars. Enjoyment level, probably even lower, but it doesn't have anything problematic in there really, so I stuck with a 2-star. Then I read The Lost Coast by Amy Rose Capetta, which I want to say is my favorite book of the month so far. This is another arc and another one that I did a full review for, so again, leaving the links everywhere, you can always find them. You should absolutely listen to my full thoughts because I love this book and I highly, highly recommend it. I just love this so much. I loved how unapologetically queer it was. I loved, in general, all the diversity in there. We have, you know, people of color and different kinds of queer people. Loved it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the female-female romance. I honestly don't have like one negative thing to say about this, even though I usually am not a huge fan of witchy novel. Well, that sounds wrong because like obviously I've read quite a lot of witchy novels, but I only really feel drawn to them if I know they have queer characters in them. So I would never usually reach for a witchy novel, like, especially contemporary witches. It really doesn't interest me, but for some reason the queer witches, they always speak to me, and this one was one of my favorite queer witch stories. I really, really loved it. It almost made my top books of the year list, maybe at the end of the year, depending on how many other books are on there. For now, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think I wanted a little bit more of an emotional connection, but still, fucking loved it. Highly recommended. Then I listened to the audiobook of In an Absent Dream by Shauna McGuire, narrated by Cynthia Hopkins. This is the 4th book in the Wayward Children series, and if you have seen any of my other thoughts about the books, I just feel very okay about these books. I enjoy them and I will continue and probably finish that series, but I always just feel okay about all of the books. I don't have any attachments to any of the characters. I don't have favorite characters in this world. I don't have like a favorite world in this world. I just really kind of feel very a neutral enjoyment about these books. So I gave it an absolute dream, 3 out of 5 stars. I really wasn't expecting anything different from it, so I feel totally fine. There's some 3-star reads where you're like, why did I waste my time? With this one, I knew what I was getting myself into, and I enjoyed it. Then I read Going Off Script by Jen Wilde, another arc, another full review that I'm gonna link. I love Jen Wilde's books, and this one, even though I didn't love it as much as Queens of Geek and The Brightsiders, was still super enjoyable and still something that I just really appreciate. Again, Jen Wilde has a huge cast of diverse characters. She also always features different usually Jen Wilde books, honestly, they feature not only queer characters from all kinds of different sexualities and different genders, people of color, but she also has people with disabilities or mental health stuff in there, and it is so nice to dive into one of her books and just know you will find all of these different diverse characters. I really appreciate Jen Wilde for doing that. I loved the romance in this book, fucking love the romance. I think that the relationship between these two characters, it happened pretty quickly, which is kind of usual for Jen Wilde's books, but the way it was written and just every scene between them, be it them just making out, be it them kind of falling for each other, I loved it. I loved every single scene between the two girls, and it was just so wonderful. I love them so much. My heart gets all warm and fuzzy just thinking about these two. In general, love the cast of characters. I think that that's another thing that you will always find in Jen Wilde's books, just an amazing, wonderful, lovable cast of characters that you just kind of want to be friends with. I think my biggest issue was just that the conflict was so obvious and just really depended on the character being conveniently stupid, which is one of my least favorite things. There were a lot of things in there about Hollywood and women in Hollywood and people of just in general, any marginalized people in Hollywood and their roles in Hollywood and how hard it is for them. Sometimes it would hit you a little bit over the head with these things, on a level where even I, as a self-proclaimed social justice warrior, would be okay, this is a bit much. But at the same time, I'd rather always have a little bit too much than this not really being there at all, because it is such a huge issue, and especially with this book being so full of diverse characters, it would have been weird to not talk about this extensively. But then I think also because Jen Wilde's novels are always so short, it's so hard with all of the stuff that's going on, and with having queer characters and people of color and people with disabilities in these stories, it's just so hard to really look at all of the issues. So everything was kind of, I don't want to say just surface level, because it's not true, but there's only so much you can do in 300 pages. And so I think that was kind of just a little bit it sometimes had to hit you just over the head with the things, because there's no time to slowly introduce things. So I don't know. I think really my biggest issue was just that I was rolling my eyes so hard at the thing that caused the conflict, and also some of the conflict, because the love interest was also kind of involved in the conflict. And so there was unnecessary drama between the two characters that for me didn't really make a lot of sense, because I felt the reaction was so over the top, and I was just talk, it's one of those just talk to each other cases, just listen. Again, I really enjoyed this. I love Jen Wilde's books, and this is no exception, but it wasn't my favorite of her books, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to Can't Escape Love by Alyssa Cole. This is one of the novellas in the Reluctant Royal series, and I, for some reason, just didn't really feel very emotional with this one. I don't know what it was. This was perfectly enjoyable. I love Reggie. I love the main character of this novella, and I'm so glad that we got a novella from kind of her perspective and having her as a main character. That made me so happy. But I just really kind of felt I wasn't really getting into this one as much. But then again, I kind of thought about the other novella, and I also didn't love that one as much as I loved all of the novels. And so I think this is probably just kind of because it's a novella. Probably I would have felt the exact same way about the other novella if it wasn't a female favorite romance. I don't know. I just know that I wasn't really emotionally connected to this story. Still very enjoyable if you love this series. just for Reggie, honestly, you should absolutely read this novella, and I give it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Birthday by Meredith Russo. I love this so much. This is such a beautiful novel. I, again, have a full review for this one that I just posted on Friday, so definitely check that one out. This is one of those books that I just want everyone to read because it is so beautiful and so important. It is also very, very hard to read. It has a lot of triggers. I'm gonna leave the triggers for this one in the description down below because there's so many, and like I think you should be extremely cautious going into this novel because I think it is it's just very much like it goes into so many different directions. Like there's the obvious transphobia and like even homophobia, but there's also so many other triggers that you just won't see coming really. So if you have any triggers, please check out the trigger warnings for this book. But this just managed to have this really beautiful balance between all of these devastating events and all of these devastating thoughts and still be so hopeful and beautiful. And while this very much deals with the main character Morgan realizing she's transgender and coming out as transgender, at the core of it, for me, this is a love story. This is a love story between two people and them kind of realizing that they love each other. It was beautiful to me how Meredith Russo managed to make us understand that they are already falling in love long before Morgan even realizes that she's trans. And I just love that because as soon as Morgan then does come out as trans and like we actually really see the feelings between the two, it's not out of nowhere. It is just something that is so clear throughout the novel and you're just kind of rooting for them. And I love that so much. I think that it's just such a well-crafted story, and just the idea in general of like having these two characters that share the same birthday and then we see them once per year, always on their birthday. It is so lovely. It is so sad, but it is so beautiful. I am in awe, and it was just beautiful. This is one of those stories that will stay with me for a really, really long time, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm actually wondering now, why did I give it 4 out of 5 stars instead of 5? Because I know there was a reason why I did. I think sometimes it just dragged a little bit. There were like some boring parts, and I also think this is one of those books that I wanted to be a little bit more emotionally connected to. But still, like, just don't look at my rating. It's just beautiful. Just read it. So many people gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. So maybe I should bump it up to 5 stars. I just loved it. Just read it. Just read it. Then I listened to The Hayden Game by Sally Thorne. This I just kind of randomly listened to because it was available at my library. I put it on hold a couple of weeks back and it was my turn. And because like 7 other people were waiting, I was like, either you listen to it now or you wait like another 3 to 4 months. So I was like, okay, just read it, even though I wasn't hugely in the mood for it, but I just went into it. First 20%, wasn't really a fan. I almost DNF'd it. I was so close to DNFing it because I didn't really like the characters. I was kind of bored, and I don't know, it didn't really grab my attention much. But then, if you read the book, the elevator scene, I just had a lot of intense feelings during the elevator scene. If you know me at all, I love the enemies to lovers trope, and I especially love when they still kind of hate each other, but they are already like physically involved with each other and they're like making out, and then they still say like, I fucking hate you or stuff like that. So this definitely served some of that good shit, and I was very, very happy. So basically, as soon as the elevator scene happened, I was just in. And I was in 100%. And from then on, I basically loved every minute. And I was so surprised because I really didn't think that it would turn around this much and I would end up loving it this much. But holy shit, I did. And I think it was just such a great book. I really wasn't expecting to love this as much, but it was wonderful. Like, honestly, just so much fun to read. I love these characters, honestly. I really, that totally took me by surprise, but so in love. I couldn't give it more than 4 stars because I had such issues getting into this book, but still 4 out of 5 stars, definitely. It was so much fun. Then I listened to Hunger by Roxane Gay. This is Roxane Gay's memoir, specifically about her body and her being raped when she was 12 and how that kind of affected her mental health, obviously, and how that then kind of affected her body and her gaining weight. It was so interesting, so I don't want to say fascinating because that sounds wrong when it's about someone else's life, but it's one of, I say it again and again and again, especially if it's memoirs written by women. It's just one of those stories that I appreciate so much. I'm so glad that Roxane Gay opened up like that and told us this story. I think that it is a really, really important novel to read. It talks a lot about wanting to be body positive while at the same time also just wanting to be thin. And it talks about all the things that just make your life much harder when you're a fat person. I loved it. I think this was such a great memoir. And obviously there's, the trigger warnings for sexual assault, for emotional abuse. But again, if you can handle the topics, I think this is such an important memoir. And finally, in the first half of May, I read I Want to Be Where You Are by Christina Forrest. This is another arc. I'm not yet sure if I'm going to do a full video review for this one, but I will definitely have a full written review. So that's definitely something I'm going to leave in the description down below. I really, really enjoyed this, and there's honestly nothing that I can say I didn't like, but I also feel like I can't really give this more than 3 stars. This is another very short novel, which I definitely think is a factor. Again, the emotional connection wasn't really there, but at the core of it, I just really loved it. It is a really beautiful story about this girl who goes to a audition for this ballet conservatory. I always mess this word up. And her mom doesn't know about it. She goes there not telling her mom because her mom has basically already told her, I don't want you to go there. And so she secretly goes on this road trip to audition. And then this dude kind of is like, oh, so where are you going? Do you want to take me with you? Because I need to go in that same direction. And she's like, no, I don't want to take you. And then he says, okay, I'm going to tell your mom about it. So obviously then she does take him and they end up kind of road tripping together. Lots of things kind of end up happening so that they are on the road together longer than they had anticipated. And it is just a really beautiful friends to lovers romance. So these 2 characters, they do know each other, but a couple of things have happened. But even though this obviously with a road trip only takes place over a couple of days, the romance between them makes a lot of sense. It is beautifully written, but also the characters have already known each other for a long time. So even if you're not I don't mind, fall in love in 3 days, as long as it's well written, I don't care. But if you're someone who does care, they definitely know each other. So it's not a romance that comes out of nowhere, but it is also about her and her dream of becoming a professional ballet dancer. It is about her kind of feeling out of place because she is black and how it kind of feels to be a black dancer between all of the white ballerinas. It is also about a lot of general family issues. Her love interest wants to study art, but his parents, or especially his dad, want him to become a lawyer like he is. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I am impressed with how much was packed into this short novel, but something just makes me not give it more than 3 stars. And I think it definitely is because it's so short. I definitely think it is because it wasn't for me a book that I cried over, that made me gasp or laugh or anything like that. I just read it. I thought that it was super enjoyable. I think if the themes are something that interests you, you should definitely pick it up. I think it is a really beautiful novel. I just wouldn't really say it's something that I would reread or that's one of my new favorites or anything like that. It's another novel that's just very wholesome. So yeah, I gave I Want to Be Where You Are 3 out of 5 stars. It's like a Shauna Maguire 3 out of 5 stars. Just like I really, really enjoyed this, but then I'm just moving on from this novel. So yeah, that's everything that I read so far in May. I obviously, again, had a really, really great first half of the month reading wise, both with quality but also with quantity. So let's hope that the month continues like that. And yeah, let me know how your reading month is going so far. And I make new videos every Wednesday and Sunday with occasional reviews on Friday. So click subscribe to never miss anything and hit the little bell so you get notified as well. And thank you so much for watching. I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!